as the sun sets on 2025, President Trump's 2026 calendar's already filling up as foreign policy pressures and domestic challenges mount. On the cards in the new year is a visit to America's greatest global competitor, China, as the economic rivals seek to manage their conflict over trade. President Trump's expected to reciprocate by hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping in the US later in the year. But as Donald Trump navigates the shifting world order that his policies have created, he's also preparing for a political fight at home, with a referendum on his presidency in the form of midterm elections just months away. Less holiday cheer for many Americans this winter, with the rise in prices on food and gifts costing each shopper an average of $132 more in 2025 than the year before, according to online lender LendingTree. It estimated that US tariffs increased total holiday expenditure for consumers and retailers by $40.6 billion. Shoppers are on the hook for most of that, an estimated $28.6 billion, leading some of them, like Gail Heathcote, to scour the store for deals.
I worked my whole life. For what? For me to be still struggling? Prices are ridiculous. And that man that's up there in that White House needs to go. He's killing us.
High prices are also driving more Americans to food banks.
We're having more first-time recipients. So right now we're seeing a 20% increase in people coming for the first time to a pantry.
I had to find a pantry because, food is coming up so expensive. And I got a family to take care of, man. There's too many bills coming in.
Retailers are expected to absorb the remaining $12 billion in extra costs from tariffs. Deborah Konensberger relies on importing clothes from Europe for her New York boutique, but tariffs have made her merchandise too expensive.
I've never really ever been in this position in my business, ever, in 36 years, where it was just so much uncertainty that I have zero control over, zero control.
But the US president insists his aggressive economic policies are helping Americans.
Inflation has stopped. Wages are up, prices are down, our nation is strong, America is respected, and our country is back, stronger than ever before.
But the latest figures show inflation is at 3%, a point over the Federal Reserve's 2% target. The National Bureau of Economic Research says its analysis shows that Trump's tariffs have contributed to that, by increasing the inflation rate by 0.7 percentage points between March and August. The tariffs have also fueled trade disputes, including with America's biggest rival, China. 2025 was marked by escalating tit-for-tat levies on imports. But there is hope for a détente.
I think what we've seen as 25 comes towards its end is that, in fact, the two sides both appreciate the importance of not blowing the relationship, or for that matter, the world, up in the process of this rivalry.
Experts say the mercurial style of President Trump makes it hard to predict where he'll take his China policy in 2026.
I think going into 2026, we should expect to continue to see not so much one single approach to China winning out, but I think you'll see a continued contestation among people who see China as more of a national security challenge, as more of an economic challenge, or even an economic opportunity. And who's winning out on a particular day will depend on the president and his personal mood.
But the courts may also have a say. 2026 could be the year that the Supreme Court strikes down Mr. Trump's most prominent tariffs when it decides on the legality of his use of an emergency law.
If his actions to date are overturned, I think that he might have to work a little harder to justify similar kinds of actions in the future under different laws, but he can still largely do it. That's my understanding.
Some analysts are concerned about another potential conflict over Taiwan. In a recent call, Chinese President Xi Jinping pressed the US president on the issue, saying the return of the self-governing island to Beijing is a key part of the post-World War II international order.
I think every year we get through another year without a war over Taiwan, it's a win. I don't know how to say whether 26 is going to be more nerve-wracking than 25. Secretary Hegseth at the Pentagon has had some good trips to Asia, as did Mr. Trump, reaffirming U.S. alliance commitments. I think that's been healthy.
Those partnerships are so important in their own right, but also because it will be very difficult for the U.S. to get where it wants to be in its China strategy without shoring up those partnerships. And we've seen a little more attention to those partnerships in the context of rare earth supply chains, diversification when it comes to critical minerals, because of course there's no way to overcome the Chinese choke points in those global supply chains without very close cooperation between the US and its allies around the world.
But these foreign policy issues are a hard sell to voters as the US enters a midterm election year with opinion polls showing Americans, like Gail, increasingly frustrated with President Trump's handling of the economy.
I want him to come and live in my house for 1 week and see how we eat.
There's around 10 months to go until the midterm elections, which will offer the chance for a report card on the first half of Donald Trump's second term in office. But it's also likely to coincide with the effects of his trade war with China.
Thanks, Norman, for joining me all the way in Vietnam. We keep missing each other because of the different travel schedules.
It's hard to get hold of Norman Cheng. Work takes him from Hong Kong to his factories in China's Guangdong province, Vietnam and Portugal every other day. Today, he's in Vietnam's Dong Nai province, a fast-emerging manufacturing hub just outside the country's commercial heart, Ho Chi Minh City.
Early in 2017, one of our largest clients called us and said, "Oh, we have a challenge." We had a brainstorming session on what to do with the incoming US president, talked about massive tariffs against China on the campaign trail. And at that time, we decided Vietnam was most suited for our needs.
He's talking about Donald Trump, now back in the White House with global tariffs in tow and China as a target. Norman's company produces sports helmets for the global market, and his business strategy remains what has now become the new norm for China-based manufacturers as they find a way around Trump's tariffs.
When I arrived here in Vietnam, I walked into a restaurant and there were people I knew, ethnic Chinese. For us business people, Vietnam gives us a way out. I mean, we're not transshipping, we're manufacturing. The technology is Chinese, the raw material base is Chinese. All the transformation in manufacturing is done here in Vietnam, but nonetheless, it's Chinese capital that's working.
And it is Chinese capital that Beijing wants to keep flowing. That strategy is laid out in the 15th Five-Year Plan, China's roadmap for its socio-economic priorities over the next 5 years. Chief on the agenda, build resilience in science and tech, where China has invested heavily and taken the lead for years.
科瑞技术呢，始终也是坚持以推动中国制造业向全球价值链高端跃升为目标。那么在过去的5年间，我们也逐步从这个设备领域，从这种单机到整线，再到智能工厂，整个全链条的价值链进行这个战略的跃升。
From customizing automation equipment to precision parts, this Shenzhen-based company helps traditional businesses transform their operations. Its orders have grown since China accelerated the shift to smart manufacturing.
他们就会加大对这个自动化和智能制造的一些投入。比方说，我们近期的话也拿到了一些这个全球标杆制造企业的一些海外工厂的一些智能工厂的订单那我们也能够帮助他们在海外进行。说我们曾经给一个客户提供这样的这个智能仓储的服务，那它的比人工效率其实是提供了这个2到3倍。
If we consider China the world supplier, then its coastal Guangdong province is, as it's often called, the world's factory. To protect that crown despite supply chain disruptions, the country is going one step further.
This machine is normally used in factories and can carry up to 600 kilograms of goods. It can follow a designated route, but for more flexibility, you can also tweak the settings to make sure it follows you. I'm going to show you how it works. Let's go!
China's robot scene has exploded. Official sources say there are over 450,000 such firms across the country, tracking a combined value of more than $900 billion. Top-tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, have turned into innovation clusters. And Shenzhen startup Pudu Robotics is now claiming a slice of that pie.
以前使用机器人的工业类的客户可能主要集中在3C 电子还有汽车制造业，但是从这2年开始的话呢，其他的各行各业的客户也多了很多，比如说有纺织业的工厂，还有食品的工厂，还有一些机械加工的工厂等等，就是客户的种类多了很多。
China's tech game has sparked worldwide attention. In fact, Pudu received 2 groups of overseas clients in the 2 hours we were there. One was from Europe and the other the UAE.
China is the leader in terms of the technology, robotics, AI. As an investor, we've got a worldwide view. We believe that robotics and artificial intelligence are the new industries of the future. So we're very interested in seeing where the opportunities are.
现在关税呢对我们的个别区域是有一定影响的，但是其实整体来看，我前面也说到，今年我们的增长率是超过100%的，那这是这个速度是非常快的。那这是为什么呢？其实主要还是因为全球范围内都还是比较缺乏比较好用的机器人产品，那我们的产品优势是非常强的。
Shenzhen, once the testing ground for China's economic reforms, has morphed from a quiet fishing village beside Hong Kong into the country's tech powerhouse. It's no surprise then that President Xi Jinping has chosen to host the APEC summit here in Shenzhen, as China takes over the grouping's rotating chair in 2026, putting up tech as a bastion against geopolitical currents.
"2025 is the year that artificial intelligence and the tools to manipulate videos ourselves landed on our laptops. Deepfakes and other AI-generated material are increasingly being used for scams, pornography, and to spread political disinformation. Here in India, authorities are trying to tackle the problem, but in a country of more than 1.4 billion, experts say the problem is spiraling out of control.
आपके पैसे सिर्फ वापस नहीं आते, वे बढ़ते हैं.
It may look like India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is endorsing an investment platform, but it's a scam created using artificial intelligence. This viral clip looked so convincing, the Indian government's press wing was compelled to issue a warning on social media. Deepfakes, which use AI to alter someone's face, body or voice in videos and images, are often used for malicious purposes. Alongside politicians, celebrities are among the common targets, with their images and voices frequently misused. Actor Amitabh Bachchan in 2024 filed a police complaint after AI-manipulated content depicted him promoting an Indian firm's sexual health products. An image of actress Katrina Kaif in the 2023 movie Tiger 3 was doctored to make it look like she was revealing more of her body. Surveys show that most Indians have been exposed to deepfake content, often without realizing it's been manipulated.
When I see some Insta videos like that, I see that, how it can be happen. So my children recognize it and they say, this is ma'am AI.
The trust breaks. What happens if they do also, we think that through AI they have done.
And the tools to create such content have become easier to access. But with this ease comes increased vulnerability to AI's darker side. A country with more than 1 billion internet users is one issue.
The second issue is with that many people and the lower levels of literacy and the breadth of the country, just education about these things like deepfakes, etc., is a much bigger problem in India than in many parts of the world.
Mr. Bindra says there's the added challenge of tensions between different ethnic and religious communities in India, which deepfakes can be used to inflame. Furthermore, such doctored material is becoming harder to detect as AI advances. I'm at Pi Labs, an Indian cybersecurity and digital forensics company, to find out why seeing isn't believing.
So Rebecca, currently you are appearing like Priyanka Chopra, one of the most famous celebrities right here.
Sure, I may not look exactly like Priyanka Chopra here, and this is just a dummy program put together for demonstrations like this. But it's convincing enough for me to pose as someone else live online, even if it isn't quite a Bollywood star.
I'm not Morgan Freeman.
What we try to do here is actually pinpoint where the actual manipulation has been done. So whenever
Pi Labs detection software uses its own AI algorithms to analyse content and identify signs of modification. It generates visual material to clearly show where tampering has occurred. The company focuses on unmasking AI deception in the banking and financial services sector, noting that worldwide, banks lose $6 billion annually to deepfake scams. Pi Labs is constantly training its systems to detect such fraud. And its co-founder says he's shocked by how quickly the technology is advancing.
It is unimaginable, right? And I cannot even predict what I will be seeing in the next 6 months or next 1 year. So every month is like a surprise in this domain. The amount of work that is getting done here and the type of software that is falling into the hands of common person.
While software developers race to keep up with the ever-evolving power of artificial intelligence, analysts say authorities have been slow to react. There's currently no specific law that governs deepfakes in India, but Indian courts have successfully used existing laws to intervene in certain cases. In October, the Bombay High Court ordered the removal of deepfake videos of Bollywood actor Akshay Kumar. It stated that the content, which appeared to show him making inflammatory statements, was so realistic that it had to be taken down to protect the actor and the wider public interest. In an effort to curb the problem, India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology wants to make it compulsory for social media platforms to clearly label AI-generated content. They also propose that platforms and creators should have shared responsibility for the proper labelling of AI material. There was no clarity on when or whether these proposed rules would eventually make it into law.
The place to kind of put pressure is actually on the distribution platforms rather than the production. Yeah, and that, I think, with what we see out there in terms of labeling everything, etc., is actually, I think, what the government is trying to do.
With New Delhi set to host the high-profile Global AI Impact Summit in February, pressure is only mounting on the Indian government to do more to address the problems that come alongside the benefits of artificial intelligence. India might be waking up to the challenges, but with regulations yet to catch up with the rapidly advancing technology, it looks to be a bumpy ride ahead.
Here in Brussels, lawmakers have spent years trying to position the European Union as a global leader in artificial intelligence governance and the ethical usage of this technology. But some of its regulations risk being watered down. The intention to remain competitive in this rapidly evolving sector, as it jostles for dominance with the likes of China and the United States. Swarm drones operating as one interconnected system, linked and controlled through artificial intelligence. They can be used in cities to rapidly detect gas leaks. Just one example of why there's such a buzz around artificial intelligence. Rudolf Duarte is the head of the Programme Management Hub at FARI, the AI Institute for the Common Good here in Brussels. The models on display here seek to demonstrate to the public and lawmakers how artificial intelligence applications can fit into Europe's vision for this technology.
When we talk about competitiveness for companies, we talk economic terms. But in Europe, what we also care for is quality of air, is how can we make sure that people stay healthy? How can we make sure that our social security systems, with the use of AI, can stay up to date and make sure that we can serve society in the longer term?
With the technology still rapidly evolving, researchers say there's huge opportunity for Europe to take the initiative to use AI as a force for good. This is a digital twin of Brussels. Using artificial intelligence, city planners can help address issues like congestion and noise pollution. Through broader support for technologies like this, the EU is mapping out a plan to play more of a leading role in the global AI sector. And behind that plan is a supercomputer called Jupiter, so powerful it can carry out more than 1 quintillion or 1 million trillion calculations per second, as fast as every smartphone in the European Union combined. Launched in September, Jupiter is the most formidable computer on the continent and 4th fastest in the world. And it'll be deployed to tackle complex issues, such as forecasting extreme weather events, potentially saving lives and minimising damage. Jupiter will also give the EU an edge in its rollout of AI factories that bring together data, talent and raw computing power to create AI applications. In the bloc's quest for global tech dominance, some experts want the private sector to act as partners.
The main difference actually to regions like the US or China is maybe not so much the political engagement, it's then also the support that comes from the private sector and the industry. And I think this is something that now is supposed to be triggered with, for example, the AI factories.
Others add that when competing against Washington and Beijing, scalability and financing are also crucial.
We need to innovate and we need to gain scale. It also is important to have ecosystems where companies across value chains come together and work together to create the deployment of AI at a much larger scale.
The EU has launched several initiatives to place AI squarely at the heart of European research, science and industry. In 2024, the bloc adopted the Artificial Intelligence Act, a comprehensive rulebook designed to create parameters for tech companies to operate. But there are now calls to switch up the bloc's usual cautionary approach.
We take time to build strong bases, to build resilience, to build security, cyber security. That's precisely what we've done. But I think that today we arrived at a moment where we cannot take time to build new regulations.
In a bid to become more competitive, the Commission has proposed a plan to simplify and scale back some of its AI regulations, including landmark laws on data protection. It's pushing to allow tech firms to use personal data to train AI models without consent, and delay stricter rules on certain high-risk AI applications until 2027.
We cannot afford to pay the price for failing to keep up with demands of the changing world. So today's package of measures sends a clear message. Europe is willing and able to adapt to fully embrace the digital age and the AI technology that will drive productivity for future European growth.
The Commission's proposal still needs the backing of the European Parliament and Council. Critics say it's a move that appeases major tech firms and US President Donald Trump, who's long railed against EU tech regulations. They fear that changes to existing regulations will weaken the EU's hand, as it seeks to shape how the world uses this technology.
Let the party begin. Malaysia's host diplomacy on full display at the recent ASEAN summit, showcasing the bloc's push for peace and economic potential.
That's why the whole world is looking at us. That's why the whole world, representing the whole continent, is here.
That's more than 30 world leaders, the largest number ever to be hosted at an ASEAN summit. It's a big deal. The gathering allowed the bloc, which faces geopolitical and economic uncertainty, to expand its network and trading opportunities and flex its convening power that stretches far and wide.
Why must we ignore Africa and Latin America? People may choose to ignore. Some countries may not like Brazil or South Africa. Nothing to do with us. We consider them as great friends.
Also building bridges and fostering peace, a deal to end violence between Cambodia and Thailand on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Its signing witnessed by US President Donald Trump. While the peace deal may be more symbolic than substantive, some see it as a signal to China that Washington, despite Beijing's ASEAN neighborhood diplomacy, is here to stay.
China is not concerned with this kind of fanfare because I think it has always been a consistent partner in the region and it's confident of its role.
But not everyone is happy with China.
I understand that the Cambodians, they are very disappointed that China did not press Thailand to the negotiation table during the conflict. I also understand that China requested Cambodia not to use some of the Chinese military equipment that it supplied.
As for the peace deal, it was short-lived, with clashes breaking out less than 2 months later. ASEAN has warned against viewing security issues in the region through the lens of superpower rivalry. It's an issue that needs delicate balance, from chair to chair.
ASEAN countries take turns to chair the bloc for 1 year. Now that rotation is based on the alphabetical order of all ASEAN countries. Malaysia was chair in 2025, which means it took over from Laos. But there are 2 ASEAN countries that start with the letter M: Malaysia and Myanmar. And because of the political situation in Myanmar, it was decided in 2023, when Indonesia was chair, that Myanmar will skip its turn, which means next in line, the Philippines.
And just how different will Manila's agenda look from that of Malaysia's?
Your Majesty, Excellencies, ASEAN is our ship, and 2026 will be the year when we set full sail together towards our shared horizon. In 2017, the Philippines steered ASEAN in consolidating its gains over the past 50 years. Although the tides of change may be unpredictable, our compass must remain constant.
Observers expect Manila to shine the spotlight on the South China Sea during its chairmanship. Understandable, given it currently has real security concerns with Beijing on the maritime front. But other ASEAN members won't be keen to have the South China Sea as the main maritime concern.
The Thais, they are concerned about their sea line of communication between Thailand and Singapore. And Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesians are concerned about piracy in the Strait of Malacca and the Strait of Singapore.
Another worry, that the South China Sea becomes a theatre of major competition. It will be tricky for Manila to balance this. 1, it counters China's claims on the South China Sea. And 2, it's also a US ally.
It has to stop seeing the South China Sea issue as a bilateral issue, but it has to see it as also a regional issue as well. So I think what it needs to do is to really bring out ASEAN's collective voice on this issue in the COC negotiations.
But to unite the bloc, the Philippines must first grapple with its internal issues.
One thing about the domestic politics of the Philippines, we have a one-term president. So he does not need to consider the next election when he designed the Philippines foreign policy. So he has a bit more freedom.
Among the issues that observers fear could distract Manila from its chairmanship, the power tussle between Mr. Marcos and his number 2, Sara Duterte, corruption, and rising discontentment among its youth. But no matter how the Philippines plans to chart its year ahead, there are inherited problems that need to be tackled. First, the Myanmar conundrum. Its military, despite the ongoing crisis in the country, is determined to hold elections in phases.
Is there anyone that believes that there will be free and fair elections in Myanmar?
Well, the military certainly does. But ASEAN members are split on these elections. Some insist they won't send officials to observe the polls. Others, like Thailand, plans to if asked. But the bloc's unified stance on Myanmar, including ASEAN's newest member Timor-Leste, is
ASEAN 5-point consensus.
It's a surprise change in Dili's stance. Before it joined the bloc, it was an extremely vocal critic of the Myanmar military and a fervent supporter of the army's enemies, the National Unity Government. In early 2025, Myanmar threatened to block Dili's bid to join ASEAN, citing interference on its affairs. But Timor-Leste made peace with the Myanmar military months before officially joining ASEAN.
What Timor-Leste is focusing on and what Timor-Leste is doing is just that. It's focusing on not jeopardizing that trajectory.
But now that it's an ASEAN member, what stance would Timor-Leste take on Myanmar?
It's a very, very small country. It needs ASEAN a lot. So I think it will try to be as balanced as possible. Where possible, it will say what it wants to say, but where decision making is concerned, I don't think that it will go against ASEAN.
For a second photo moment.
If this were true, it means the Philippines has perhaps one less thing to worry about where ASEAN unity is concerned. It might even breathe easier now that US and China have agreed on a deal that could ease trade tensions for about a year.
But whether that pause can last or not is really another thing, because we have seen President Trump's actions where it's always on and off again.
Yet another cause for uncertainty? Mr. Trump's directive for the Pentagon to begin testing nuclear weapons on an equal basis with Russia and China. Will that heat things up?
I think that the call for nuclear testing is a negotiation tactics. You raise the stake, you buy chips so that you can have more to trade away, in your negotiations.
Regardless, the Philippines has its plate full, from challenges that come with trade and geopolitical uncertainties to more concrete security threats in the region. And within ASEAN, it has to maintain peace in the bloc, including resolving immediate challenges in its own backyard.
A wave of violent protests swept through the country in August, just days after Indonesia marked its 80th anniversary and 10 months into President Prabowo Subianto's term. Public frustration over economic pressures reached its boiling point after reports of lawmakers receiving excessive salaries and allowances. Mr. Prabowo's first year of leadership was certainly not without controversy. Thousands of food poisoning cases tainted his ambitious free nutritious meals program, and markets were rattled by his first major cabinet reshuffle, which saw the exit of Indonesia's longest-serving finance chief, Sri Mulyani Indrawati. As his administration enters its second year, analysts say Mr. Prabowo will continue consolidating his influence, gradually replacing those perceived to be loyal to his predecessor. He's also expected to push forward his flagship programs, despite some falling short of expectations.
He is focusing so much on, number one, how to create economic growth, because he believes that will stimulate the people's prosperity. On the other side, he knows that there are a lot of people who are in need of assistance. Therefore, he is doing a lot of welfare programs, populist programs.
Other programs include housing, food staples, education, energy, and non-energy subsidies, as well as infrastructure projects. The priority programs consumed 65.8% of the 2025 state budget in the first 10 months of the year. And the Indonesian parliament approved an increase to the 2026 budget deficit against GDP from 2.48% to 2.68%, with President Prabowo targeting an 8% growth target. The president had also made eradicating corruption a priority agenda of his administration. And he's already hit milestones, with some $795.5 million returned to the state treasury from a corruption case involving the export of crude palm oil and its derivatives.
Kita bertekad tidak ada kasus-kasus korupsi yang tidak bisa diselidiki. Tidak ada, no more untouchable, nggak ada yang untouchable lagi. Saya terima kasih penegak hukum yang tegar meneruskan tugas yang mulia ini.
But not everyone is convinced. There are growing concerns over the expanded roles of the police and military, with amended laws that allow officers to take on more civilian roles without leaving their service. Despite a constitutional court ruling that requires the officers to resign before taking up such roles, Indonesia's law minister said it only applies to future appointments.
Kekhawatiran bahwa kemudian militer akan semakin campur tangan dalam politik atau kemudian menjadi political backup bagi Prabowo itu cukup menggelisahkan bagi kalangan pegiat hak sipil di Indonesia. Polisi itu kemudian menggantikan peran militer ketika masa Orde Baru, gitu ya. Dan kemudian terjadilah sejumlah peristiwa yang kemudian mencemarkan nama baik kepolisian.
Indonesia enters 2026 with a new criminal code and criminal procedure code, which replace outdated laws.
Setuju. Terima kasih.
But some provisions have drawn criticism from civil society groups, such as the ban on cohabitation between unmarried couples and placing civil service investigators under coordination of the police. The new criminal and procedural codes also criminalize protests deemed disruptive or unsanctioned, and allow prosecution of insults against the president, effectively expanding the government's legal powers to manage dissent.
A survey showed President Prabowo's approval rating remains steady at 78%, 1 year after taking office, despite economic and social challenges, including protests against some of his policies. Mr. Prabowo has built a ruling coalition that includes all but one political party in the House of Representatives, controlling over 80% of the total seats. Expectations remain high on Mr. Prabowo as Indonesia waits to see if he fulfills all of his promises.
Japanese leader Sanae Takaichi's premiership began with a flurry of diplomatic activity. Her first overseas stop, the week she took office in October, was Malaysia, where she met the region's leaders at the ASEAN summit. Then she flew back to Tokyo and played host to US President Donald Trump.
I have a really great respect for the new and incredible Prime Minister. I have to say this, the first female Prime Minister in the history of Japan. Madam Prime Minister.
Vowing a new golden age of ties with Japan's closest ally. Days later, she sought to build rapport with South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit in Gyeongju, signaling a promising start to relations often strained by wartime history and geopolitical disputes. But hopes of cordial ties with Japan's neighbors began to unravel after Ms. Takaichi made comments on Taiwan that sparked strong backlash from China, which claims the island as its own. The Prime Minister said a Taiwan contingency, if it involved the use of force, could threaten Japan's existence, suggesting it would exercise its right to self-defense. Ms. Takaichi has refused to retract her statement.
戦艦を使ってですね、そして武力の行使も伴うものであれば、これはどう考えても存立危機事態になりうる、ケースであると私は考えます。
Ms. Takaichi's remarks in the Diet marked the first time a sitting Japanese leader publicly suggested a possible military response from Tokyo over the Taiwan issue, and sparked a diplomatic spat with China, which responded swiftly, advising Chinese citizens to avoid traveling to Japan and halting imports of Japanese seafood, supposedly over radiation concerns, according to Japanese officials. This marked the first major foreign policy challenge for Ms. Takaichi, who defended her comments as being consistent with the government's traditional stance, though she later added they were based on a worst-case assumption.
Prime Minister Takaichi's statement at the Diet was her mistake. She didn't intend to say such a clear thing. But the problem is, in Japan, there are many supporters for that kind of state. So that is the power base of Prime Minister Takaichi.
Even before Ms. Takaichi's rise to power, there were questions about how the conservative politician would shape Japan's foreign policy. Observers pointed out her hawkish stance on security, visits to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, which honors war dead, including war criminals, and friendly ties with Taiwan. Similar to her mentor, the late Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest-serving prime minister and a staunch U.S. ally.
Abe had a lot going on behind the scenes to try to improve relations with China. He knows better than you don't just poke China with a stick and expect to get anywhere.
He's a very, very realistically minded politician. He understood the balance between the ideals and the reality. And that's why he could survive more than 80 years in the premiership. Can Ms. Sanae Takaichi do the same? Probably not easy for her, because this is her first term.
Observers warn the latest row between the two neighbors could lead to a prolonged cooling in relations, while a more unpredictable U.S. under President Trump makes it challenging for Japan to lean on its ally for support. For now, media polls show strong public approval ratings for Ms. Takaichi's cabinet, which approved a $135 billion stimulus package to spur economic growth and help the public cope with rising costs of living. She also pledged to raise defense spending to 2% of GDP this fiscal year, 2 years earlier than planned, to strengthen Japan's capabilities. But Ms. Takaichi's political position remains weak. Her Liberal Democratic Party heads a minority government, one that is especially fragile after longtime coalition partner Komeito left, forcing her to join forces with another party, Nippon Ishin.
Supporting rate for LDP is low. There is no change. So there is some kinds of discrepancy between Takaichi's popularity and LDP's support. Relationship with Ishin become very difficult because Ishin's approval rate is not so high.
Ms. Takaichi said she has no plans to dissolve parliament and hold a snap election to gain a stronger mandate. The new leader will have to find ways to steer Japan through multiple pressures, from rising consumer prices on the back of U.S. tariffs to the risk of further retaliation from Beijing.